Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the first of two main bits of Brexit news in terms of government action, as another little bit of Brexit has died. The UKCA mark was dealt effectively a final blow, and some of our intended standard controls are delayed for another year. But although we have a government which is unashamedly wanting a close relationship with the EU on all policy areas, they're still facing the same Brexit realities that the Tories tried to wish away, some of which have no good solutions. But today I'm going to talk about the one that has a relatively easy solution, axing the UKCA mark in practical terms. One of the few easy answers, because it was entirely down to us to introduce it, it's entirely down to us to get rid of it. Even the previous Tory government were on course for doing this. They'd realised it was nonsense. Each year there was a deadline for manufacturers to adopt the UKCA mark if they wanted to sell in the British market, and each year they extended the deadline as manufacturers at both home and abroad said, well, we're not gonna. The consequences of enforcing the deadline would have been catastrophic. As I've mentioned in the past, I imagine, for example, parts for something vital, like lifts in shopping centres. There are only so many of a particular part needed in the country and indeed Europe. So for certain parts, there's probably like one factory in Dusseldorf that makes them. But if they don't sell enough of that vital but inexpensive parts to Britain for it to be worth their while going through the hassle and expense of registering their products for UKCA accreditation, they would just not bother. They say, OK, if we can't sell to Britain, it's a bit of a hassle, but it's just we don't make enough money to be worth it. If the deadline had been enforced, then that would mean they couldn't legally sell that part to Britain. A small loss to them, but then it would mean that then those shopping centre lifts or lifts in hospitals or wherever can no longer be maintained. As soon as you need that part, well, we can't get the part. There's no one in this country that manufactures them. There's no one anywhere that manufactures them with the UKCA mark, so we can't do it. The lift's knackered, you have to buy a new one. And that would hit lots of vital but inexpensive and uncommon parts all across the country, from cars to medical equipment, vital parts which are not needed in sufficient quantities to warrant manufacturers in every country or even one large manufacturer going through the UKCA mark hoops. And you know, even if the product is in common use and the trade valuable enough to adopt the UKCA mark, because some did, it still raises the cost of production for no benefit to the consumer. Remember, it's identical to the CE mark, in terms of standard. So that would, and that cost ends up being passed on in the form of higher prices because the manufacturer has to cover the cost of it. So at best, British consumers would pay more money for no benefit, and at worst, they wouldn't be able to get the products at all. UKCA was a symbol of Britain doing its own thing, separate to the EU, for purely ideological reasons. And just as with everything else Brexit related, when it was let loose into the wild of post-Brexit reality, it was immediately mauled by a tiger. So the Tories initially kept delaying the UKCA deadline each year. It's like they were playing this game of chicken with manufacturers. We'll give it another year. They will show people that we're serious, right? And then they'll go, all right, we'll do the UKCA mark. Then they get to about September, October time, and they go, oh, they're not going for it. Oh, we'll have to delay it again. And the problem with this is you had manufacturers, for example, who hadn't adopted the UKCA mark, not knowing whether because usually it was round about this time of year, round about August, September time, or sometimes even October, I think on one occasion, when the government would go, all right, we'll delay it again. But until they'd announced that, you were like 2 or 3 months away from not knowing if you were going to be able to sell this part in Britain, or if you were a consumer, like a business that needs to buy those parts, you didn't know if you were going to be able to get them. So you couldn't plan for those few months ahead. It's absolutely mind-bending how stupid this is. You know, the Conservatives, the party of business, do me a favour. So anyway, they kept delaying. They'd extend the deadline. And then, you know, I think 2023, they went, right, let's just extend the deadline for 2 years because we're looking silly at the moment, right? So that would have then applied 2025. And now Labour have come out and they've just permanently cancelled the deadline for construction products. Now, the Tories had already deleted it for like everything else. So it's only left for construction. But now that that's been cancelled, that's it now. The CE mark can effectively be used indefinitely in Britain. The UKCA mark still exists. Some products will still carry it because, you know, the manufacturers have paid for it. They might as well. And it can now exist as a badge to let us know which products we've paid extra for, thanks to Boris Johnson's folly, because there's no way those manufacturers just absorb the costs into their own profits. And unlike with some other madcap Tory policies, I'm not even seeing signs of anguish from the Brexiteers on this one. They're not going mad over it. Oh, you lost our UKCA mark. I suppose it's early days. I mean, maybe they're saving it for the Sunday papers or something. I suspect not. Because right now, I've seen absolutely nobody really complain about it. I even looked up a few, like Frosty the No Man, to see if on Twitter they're having a little moan about it. No, I haven't seen nothing. I think they've accepted that some of their performative nonsense is really not worth trying to save. The UKCA mark was supposed to be, it's performative. And it was an idea that can only be conceived by someone who had no idea how trade, manufacture or supply chains work on even a very basic level. Obvious from the start, there was no benefit in having our own standards mark and at a lot of cost. The only justification would have been if we wanted to raise standards for some products above the level of the EU and therefore beyond that which the CE mark would validate. And even then, you'd only expect those specific products affected by the legal higher standards to use the UKCA mark. If you were going to introduce this UKCA mark, it should only have been sensibly applied to products which need legally to be manufactured, produced to a higher standard than the CE mark accounts for. But as was very predictable from the start, we had no intention of raising any standards beyond the CE mark level, so it had zero purpose. The Tories basically expected all products to use the UKCA mark alongside the CE mark at extra expense for no reason other than the government could go, look, we did that. That was Brexit, that. But, you know, and this came as a severe shock to Boris Johnson's government, it turns out. Apparently, manufacturers aren't all that keen on spending a load of extra money on production for nothing. Some businesses adopted it. They believed they needed to get ahead of the game. Others risked it or decided it just wasn't worth the cost, even if they had to abandon the British market. So the delays began like a road to nowhere. And now the government have finally said it serves no purpose. We can all just conduct our business as if it didn't exist. But this was easily dealt with, as I say. It was entirely unilateral. It wasn't part of any Brexit deal. We don't need agreement with any other country, much less the EU about it. It was something we adopted domestically, unilaterally, so it's something we can drop domestically, unilaterally. The bigger Brexit problems to deal with are those which the UK government, whatever party, is simply not in a position to unilaterally decide. Which will bring me to the dilemma of standards checks, which I'll aim to go over tomorrow, unless two massive news stories suddenly break overnight. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.